Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you didn't have too much problems getting to the place. I mean, I know that some streets around the block have been closed, so we hope that some more people will be arriving as we go into the first panel for this morning. Just a couple of things. First of all, welcome to our panelists. Welcome to David Holdcroft, a fellow Jesuit who works at JRS International. May tell us a bit more about that. Just two little technical announcements for now. One is there is material, as I said, outside on the tables, including the dossier, the Italian dossier, Statistico Immigrazione, which is available for you just to take. It's for free. We have several copies if you'd like to take even more than one. And it's a useful instrument with a lot of statistics and which can help people understand the phenomenon of migration, especially in Italy. And I recommend that if you don't have a copy, that you should take one, I think. There are other books which are available for free. There's only one table where books are being sold. It is the G&B Press table, and there is Father Thomas Gies who will be manning that table this morning. The second thing is we will switch to breakout groups after our break, our coffee break. So I will tell you how we'll do this, but basically just to have the idea for now, the people in this room, you'll see how many people there are. So the English-speaking will go to C009. English-speaking will go to C009. And we'll try to split the Italian-speaking in half. So those born from January to June, let's say, may stay in this room with Luca Di Ciullo, who will moderate the one Italian-speaking group in this room. And another Italian-speaking group, those born from July to December, will be in C008. Lo ripeto anche in italiano, quindi facciamo durante due gruppi italofoni, dalla gente che è presente in aula, uno qua e uno nella C008. As regards people following online, we'll have to switch from this connection, which is Zoom webinar, to the second link which we've sent, which is Zoom meeting, so that you will follow the breakout groups. And then at 11, so this will be at 11 a.m., and then at 11:50, you have to go back to this link that is to the Zoom webinar. We will help you because I will place a link to the Zoom meeting in the chat of the Zoom webinar. So before we go to the break, I will make a link in the Zoom webinar for those who are following us online. You'll click on that link, and then you can connect eventually to the breakout rooms. Okay, that may sound a little bit complicated, but we'll try to make it as easy as possible. So let us start. Welcome, everyone, and let's give the word to Father Holdcroft.
Good morning, everyone. Buongiorno and benvenuti a tutti. I hope you can understand my Australian English. They'll be speaking Australian this morning, but the other speakers will be speaking in a mixture of English and Italian. Good morning. Yesterday we heard about the nature and definitions of modern slavery, its extent internationally, and some of the legislative and civil society responses to this scourge, as Pope Francis speaks of it. David Hollenbach spoke from Washington about the manner in which the modern church has mounted a strong condemnation, however, one which must be tempered with humility given the church's own history of lack of condemnation and also active involvement in slavery historically. In this session, we move to address the question of how our personal faith and our faiths as networks and institutions can help us collectively construct practical responses to eradicate modern slavery. Our panel, we have two people coming in online from Ghana, Accra, in Africa, and from Australia, as well as Cristina and Katharina present with us this morning. They have a deep and varied experience in fighting slavery in different manners and dealing with its psychological after effects. My name is Father David Holcroft. I'm a Jesuit priest. I'm the professional and post-secondary education specialist at Jesuit Refugee Service International. So while we do not have direct direct programs fighting slavery, we are working to try and remove the market for it by working with refugees in different parts of the world, trying to ensure they have an education and they build a life where they have choices and they have hope. The format for this morning, there are four of us to speak, and I'll alternate an in-person speaker with an online person. They'll speak for 10 to 12 minutes each, and then there'll be a question and answer session, which I invite you to think of questions and think of this as a conversation. I'm really wanting us to go away this morning with sort of, what can I do with that question answered at least in part? What can I do? What are the networks I can leverage? How can I help solve this situation? Because we can't solve it individually. We can only solve it working together. So our first speaker this morning is Katharina Fuchs. She's a trained psychologist and assistant professor in the Institute of Psychology here at the Pontifical Gregoriana. She specialises in topics related to clinical psychology, and she's dealt with many a victim of the topic for today. So I want to begin by asking Katharina, that you've worked extensively with victims of slavery. Can you tell us a little bit of the consequences, the psychological consequences, and also the possible signs and indicators, and also what the Church already offers with regards to victims' need and what more it could do? Thank you. Your floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Father Holcroft, for the kind introduction and presentation. Good morning to all of you here present in the Aula Magna, but also online via Zoom or via YouTube. I also would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this important conference and for the kind invitation. Well, I would like to present you in my short talk this morning some of the indicators and the consequences that human trafficking or modern slavery may have on the lives of people, on their mental and their physical health, but eventually only also on their spiritual life. And after having listened to various testimonials yesterday afternoon, I would like to start with one short testimonial from a Burmese migrant trafficked within Thailand and on high seas. He says, "They promised us work, but treated us like dogs. At the border, an agent sold me to a ship captain. We set to sea in a shaky fishing boat, kept on board for 3 months straight, no going ashore. When I protested, I was dropped at the pier, locked in a container for 3 weeks, nobody noticed. I was invisible." So we have already heard that several times yesterday afternoon, that many victims, or most victims, of human trafficking and modern slavery are invisible. Invisible because modern slavery happens behind closed doors, or they are invisible because we don't want to see them, we don't want to have a closer look, so sometimes we also consciously oversee them. But nevertheless, they are there. They are part of our society, they are part of humanity, and they are suffering. They are deeply wounded people. So now, when we ask ourselves, but how can we understand whether a person has been trafficked or is a modern slave? Well, first of all, the work and the living conditions may give us some hints. As we have also heard yesterday, very often they are paid only less or they are unpaid. They have to work like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have also heard examples of minors under the age of 18 who were part of commercial sexual activities as prostitution, sexual online exploitation. Very often those people are not free to come and go to the places where they live, to the working places, but they are always under observation, and very often with high security measures. There's a lack of control, so that means that those people, they don't have access, for example, to their money. Very often they don't have a bank account. They don't have access and control over their document, their passports, their IDs. And very often they are not even allowed to talk or to speak for themselves. So all that leads very often to an inconsistency and also to gaps with regard to personal information, but also the personal story. So there is a lack of knowledge, of the whereabouts. So they have difficulties to tell about themselves, so where they come from, what is their background, what are their living conditions, who are they? Well, this may be due to various reasons. They may be afraid of talking because they fear very severe consequences, but also as a kind of auto-protection. Not thinking about their past, when their life was still different, when they may still have had some kind of a happy life. So also some kind of a protect mechanisms of the brain in order not to suffer too much. And we also have heard that very often abuse, violence, and exploitation is combined with human trafficking and modern slavery, like sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional neglect and abuse, sexual exploitation, psychological violence. So that means, for example, that people are beaten and burned, or that people are deeply hurt by the behavior of others, but also by words. And all that, of course, has consequences, as I said in my introduction, on their mental and physical health, on their emotions, on their feelings, on their behavior, but also on their lives in itself. So emotional consequences are, for example, fear, anxiety, but also anger that many victims feel. We have quite often shame and feelings of guilt as consequences, and we know that these are really enemies also for disclosure, for trusting somebody, and really to look for help, for support, and to talk. So very often they feel just worthless. They have feelings of helplessness. And all that helps somehow to worsen their situation. There are psychological consequences, as they also lack the contact with others, with other people in society. So really to relate with them, to build up trustful relationships due to the abuse of trust that has happened to them. Yesterday afternoon, Sister Monica was talking about the girl. To her was promised that she will come to Italy to have a good life, to have a good job, but at the end, she was there for other reasons. And she finished somehow up, thanks be to God, Sister Monica and her congregation helped her, but otherwise she would have finished in child prostitution and in sexual exploitation. There are behavioral consequences, also linked to their emotions. So those people may react very, very fearful and anxious when others try to get in contact with them. They may react very fearful if they are, for example, touched. So they may have sleeping problems. They may have a loss of appetite, for example, due to all the stress. So they may be tensioned all the time and quite nervous. There are also consequences for their physical health. Well, we have heard about forced labor. So very often, now if we think about minors, their bodies are not made for heavy work. So this may somehow ruin their shoulders, especially their back, their neck. Many of them have a very low immune system due to what has happened to them. And also there we can really see how body and mind are connected with each other. Others have wounds because they were beaten or burned, for example. So also here we can see really tremendous and very severe outcomes and effects. The same is true for the mental health of victims of modern slavery and human trafficking. Also, again, linked to the behavior in the emotions. So many have not only problems, but really will develop some kind of mental disorder, like depression, like anxiety disorders, sleeping disorders, addictions to alcohol, to drugs, to pharmacies, just to survive, to feel better for a moment, to be able to live that terrific situation. But very often, modern slavery leads also to a so-called post-traumatic stress disorder. That means that those people are really highly traumatized. They have nightmares, they have flashbacks about really very traumatic events in their life. They are over-attentive, they have difficulties in concentrating, and as another effect, they try to avoid situations, activities, people, and so on, that may somehow stimulate this kind of flashbacks and nightmares. And we have also heard yesterday that some victims may have suicidal thoughts or may even commit suicide. So also that might be a consequence out of that. And if we think about faithful victims of human trafficking and modern slavery, so there are also consequences for their spiritual life and for their faith. So what about God, for example? Why didn't he intervene? Why did this happen to me? So there are many issues and many questions. And I have just given some examples. Well, the list for all the single consequences is much longer, but I really think we can understand the severe and the horrendous effects that human trafficking and modern slavery, and it doesn't matter which kind, whether we talk about sexual exploitation, whether we talk about forced labor, about forced marriage, we have seen that there are many phases and facets of modern slavery. All of them have severe and very often long-lasting and lifelong consequences if the victims don't get any help and if we don't intervene. So we have already heard yesterday about various organizations on an, let's say, ecclesial level. The Union of the General Superiors of female and male religious are doing a lot. We have heard about Talitha Kum. We have heard about the Jesuit Refugee Service. We have heard about the World Prayer Day for victims of human trafficking on February 8 each year. So let's say on a universal level, many things are already done. But we need to do more to create awareness and sensitivity. Okay, thank you. Through information and formation on all levels. So this needs to be a top-down process from a level of leadership to the ground, but also bottom-up. So we really need to work together. Every person on the ground needs to be aware of that through conferences and meetings like that. But also each of us can make his or her little contribution talking about these topics to others, in the free time, talking to family members, to colleagues, to friends. We need education and empowerment of children and adolescents. So to tell them that this may happen, especially children and adolescents in countries and places that are at a high risk. So maybe also teach them and educate them about strategies that traffickers often use. The same is true for adults. Well, for adults in two senses, as also they can be victims, but also parents might try to do everything to protect their own children. We need more networking also on local levels. Well, we have seen in many religious congregations it already worked on a global level, but also on a local level, really to see what kind of help, of support is there in my place, is around, with whom may I collaborate, what kind of interdisciplinary team do I need to face this issue. And also in the church, we need to include all members, priests, religious, consecrated, lay people, so all levels and also with various professional backgrounds. And as it is a human problem and a universal problem, we need collaboration also on an interreligious level. So just let me sum up briefly. It means that all of us need to get involved as entire person, to make the invisible visible, to listen to the silent cries for help, to read between the lines, to read in the faces of the people, and to answer with care and love. Of course, now you can say, but I'm not available, I don't have the courage to go to the street to talk to people. Well, of course, not all of us can do that or are able to do that. But nevertheless, if we see a person and we have a suspicion, we can have a closer look, we can have a smile, we can start a conversation. How are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need any help? So just to demonstrate our availability. And we can connect with others and inform others if there's really a suspicion. And I really like the so-called head, heart, hand approach. So it means it's not enough just to understand this issue, to understand the data and the numbers on a cognitive, on an intellectual level. We really need to be touched on an emotional level with our heart, because only then we are willing to be proactive and try to change things and to get involved. And maybe just with our little contribution, this can also a reflection or on our consummation. So what do we buy in the supermarket, on the market? What kind of products? Where do they come from? Also that would be a kind of contribution. And I always say, maybe one victim won't change the statistics and won't change the numbers, but one victim that will get help will have a different life. And the life of this victim will change in a very significant way. And that's really why it's worthy to get involved and to make our little contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katharina. I like that, to make the invisible visible, to listen to the silent cries for help, and to answer with care and love, and the head, heart, hand. It's those are the sorts of things we can easily remember. We're going to go to Africa now, and Sheikh Armiyawo Shaibu, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly, is the spokesperson for the National Chief Imam of Ghana. He's a member of the Chief Imam's Advisory Board and is a representative of the National Chief Imam on the National Peace Council of Ghana, and he's the Imam of the Dar es Salaam Masjid. Sheikh, I want to begin by asking you, how does your Muslim faith collaborate with other faith-based organizations and communities, and also government in Ghana, to address the problem of modern slavery? And also personally, how does your Muslim faith resource you to keep going, to keep at this? And if we can bring you online. I know
Thank
you're
you
there.
very much
Great.
for this opportunity. Let me also begin on a note of thanks and appreciation. to the Global Freedom Network, specifically to my good sister, Franca Pellegrini, for making it possible for me to join this very important global discussion. Let me also say how glad I am and delighted to be part of this panel and to share my reflections on the subject that confronts us currently globally. For a start, I think we need to establish that how vicious and damaging modern slavery is yet to be appreciated in all its complexities. And because of that, the response that it requires has not been given to that level. And so there is lack of sensitivity to the issue. There is hesitation in terms of the policy that needs to be put in place in order to ensure that modern slavery is eradicated or reduced to its lowest ebb. And if there is that sensitivity, it means that there's that insensitivity. It means that we have not understood how damaging it is. Modern slavery, or slavery in all its forms, whether ancient or modern, is an abuse on human right, an abuse of human right of the highest order. It is a violation of the dignity of man. It is one of the most horrendous and horrible treatment that a fellow human being can be subjected to. It reduces man, the human being, into a property to be owned and to be exploited and to be held in bondage. And I agree with Katharina how she said the psychological impact it leaves on those who are the victims. But we also need to understand, because there is the demand for it, there's a high demand for cheap labor, as against also the struggle of the victims, of the disadvantaged, also to pursue a living or the struggle for survival. And that is the angle from which we want to come and to indicate that Islam as a religion upholds the dignity of the human person. And that is why reference can be made to the 5 germane principles that underpin the application of the Sharia principles. Because of time, I will not go through all the 5, but at least the 2 that are so important as underpinning the application of Sharia to promote human comfort and respectable human survival. One of them is the protection of life, and the other one is the protection of human dignity. So therefore, from the Islamic perspective, modern slavery in all its forms, whether modern or ancient, runs counter to the Islamic teachings, and so therefore it must be seen as socially objectionable and morally reprehensible. And once we understand its damaging effect to the level that we are making reference to, then the level of our efforts will be increased, and we shall all collaborate in dealing with the damage. In Ghana, luckily for us, we have a model of interfaith leadership that allows different faiths to enter into alliance and address issues that affect the larger society, issues that brings difficulty to the members of society. The National Chief Imam, my leader, whom I represent, really applies this kind of model of leadership. So within the Muslim community, we have succeeded in bringing together the different sects, i.e., we have the Tijaniya, which is a a mystical confraternity a group. Like you all know, we have the Ahlul Sunnah, which is also there. We have the Shia and we have the Ahmadiyya. These are the major Islamic sects that constitute the Muslim community in Ghana. In some other communities, in some other nations, it is not possible to see these different sects coming to sit around the same table and be discussing matters that affect the generality of society. So the model of leadership that has been introduced has made it possible for us to break the barriers and to use that intersect collaboration as a means to galvanize energies and resources to tackle matters of such nature that affect every human being without any discrimination. So that is one of the platforms that we are able to apply in Ghana. But beyond the intersectarian collaboration within the Muslim community, the model of leadership in Ghana has also made it possible for us to collaborate across the religious divide. So the Office of the National Chief Imam has a good working relationship with the Christian Council of Ghana. And we have been organizing programs beyond what has to do with human trafficking, but that we work together. And then, as I speak to you, we are also in collaboration with the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Ghana to establish an effective framework of collaboration that makes it possible for us to be able to work in Ghana on the specific subject of the human trafficking or modern slavery. We held a conference, and I'm sure my good sister Franca will give certain background to that. It has been possible for us to really participate with the president of the Christian Council of Ghana and the Secretary General of the Catholic Bishops' Conference and myself as the spokesperson for the National Chief Imam for us to be working together. What do we seek to do with these levels of collaboration in addressing this scourge, the scourge of modern slavery in all its forms? One of the approach is to establish a framework of campaign against modern slavery that will allow us to embark upon programs designed to address the problem of human trafficking as a dimension of modern slavery in the medium, short, and long-term sense, such that because of the complexity of the phenomenon, a multifaceted approach is needed. And that is why it is not something that can be eradicated within the context of just one program. And because of that, we are in the process of establishing a whole framework of campaign against the modern slavery. And secondly, we are also embarking upon a program of collaboration with established CSOs and state institutions that have been established to promote human rights and to educate citizenry about their civic responsibilities, including the mutual protection and respect for human rights. So, for example, we have the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. We have a collaboration. We have the National Commission on Civic Education that has the mandate to educate citizenry on responsible citizenship, which also includes what we do to protect citizens in our country. This is a huge venture that requires a lot of resources but from the confines of different religions, we are making the necessary effort. But let me end up on a note on how personal faith could be used. And I think both Islam and Christianity uphold a principle of love and protection and sympathy for the neighbor. Just like in Christianity, the principle of love thy neighbor as thyself is upheld. Islam also said, if you believe in Allah and the last day, then you should avoid harming your neighbor. So we need to promote at the personal level the principles of love, respect for human dignity, care for the human being, protection of human rights, and those things that needs to be imbibed using the framework of the mosque as a center of human transformation and human liberation. I'm sure I'm getting out of time, and I will end it up here for some other questions that will come. I want to once again thank you so much for this special opportunity, and hope that I will take some questions when the time comes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chief Armiyawo. And I really took the establishment of the framework of campaigning, the establishment of a framework as a way to address the complexity of what we're dealing with. And I think that's a really very forward-thinking civil society, faith, government collaboration, and something that I really take note of. So moving on, we go back to Italy now, and Cristina Molfetta is the International Protection, Research and Training Contact Person for Italy and Europe at the Migrantes Fondazione, which is associated with the Italian Bishops' Conference. She's a cultural anthropologist and has worked for more than 15 years in the area of protection of human rights and international cooperation in various refugee camps. And I've yet to have a conversation with her about her past work there. Cristina, how is the work of the Migrantes Fondazione working to counter trafficking in Italy? And how has the pandemic changed the nature of what you are dealing with? And I believe that you're going to highlight a couple of the regions where you work. So look forward to hearing from you.
Bentrovati a tutti, è un piacere essere qui. Vi do un pochino di tempo perché credo che qualcuno debba passare ad ascoltare nelle cuffiette la traduzione dall'italiano all'inglese. Come vi hanno detto, appunto io lavoro per la Fondazione Migrante. La Fondazione Migrante è uno degli organismi della Conferenza Episcopale Italiana e ha 220 punti in tutta Italia, una per ogni diocesi. Non tutti gli uffici della Fondazione Migrantes sono attivi rispetto alla tratta e della moderna per prevenire la tratta e la moderna schiavitù, però ne ho scelto uno, quello che è di Torino, che in realtà sta dentro alla lotta contro la tratta da più di 20 anni, che è l'Ufficio Pastorale Migranti, ed è uno dei 20 punti che sta dentro a questa realtà che vi è stata illustrata benissimo ieri, quindi adesso non sto a replicare. L'ho scelto per due motivi, perché da buona antropologa è una realtà dentro una rete con tante altre realtà, come vi è stato spiegato, e questo mi dava modo di fare una cosa, di intervistare persone dentro istituzioni religiose ma anche esterne, perché qua ci si interroga su qual è la specificità dell'avere una fede o di essere un istituto religioso rispetto al combattere la tratta. Bene, spesso per riuscire a capire le specificità bisogna andare fuori, perché le specificità si vedono meglio rispetto agli altri, e quindi io ho intervistato anche molti operatori, in realtà non credenti e non appartenenti a istituzioni religiose, ma che collaboravano con enti religiosi facendo parte della stessa rete. Così come ho chiesto a delle suore, dei preti e dei laici che lavoravano dentro alle istituzioni religiose di questa rete se questo faceva una differenza oppure no. E poi l'abbiamo chiesto anche ad alcune delle persone che erano le vittime. E quindi in questo piccolo esercizio, perché poi io mi sono fermata solo una settimana, si potrebbe fare una ricerca molto più approfondita, vi dico quello che è venuto fuori. In realtà per molte delle suore e dei preti che facevano parte o dell'ufficio pastorale migranti di Torino oppure del gruppo Abele, che è un'altra delle realtà, come dire, del Piemonte che si occupa da anni di questo tipo di problematiche, secondo loro essere preti o suore non cambiava, cioè loro non vedevano in loro stesse un valore aggiunto rispetto al lavoro che tutta la rete in realtà faceva. Una delle persone che lavora da più di 40 anni, che è Suor Maresa, che sta lì nell'ufficio da un sacco di tempo e che si occupa di tratta, mi ha addirittura detto: no, secondo me essere una suora non cambia particolarmente, ma crea un'aspettativa maggiore da parte delle persone che vengono, cioè le persone che possono rivolgersi a noi spesso hanno un'aspettativa maggiore di quello che noi possiamo fare, di quello che poi effettivamente riusciamo a fare. In realtà molte delle persone che non credevano, ma che erano di altri enti, mi hanno detto: secondo noi invece è importante che ci siano delle persone religiose, perché molti dei nostri utenti, in particolar modo le donne nigeriane, le donne della Costa d'Avorio, le donne dell'Est Europa, riescono, perlomeno in una prima fase, rispetto, e parliamo di suore, alcune sono riconoscibili, altre no, molte sono vestite laicamente, come dire, quando stanno dentro in un ufficio, in un servizio antitratta, non sono riconoscibili dagli altri operatori. Quindi qualcuno ci diceva: avere un vestito che le rende riconoscibili inizialmente facilita, può facilitare per chi ha una fede. Tutte erano concordi sul dire una cosa: quello che è molto importante è che la persona, con qualunque motivo venga, spesso non viene dicendo che è vittima di tratta, spesso entra in uno degli sportelli per dire che ha un problema con il permesso di soggiorno, ancora di più durante la pandemia che ha un problema rispetto alla casa e ai soldi. Ed è molto importante non obbligare la persona, come dire, a metterla nella casellina dove noi ci immaginiamo che stia, ma ad accompagnarla rispetto al problema che la persona porta. Bene, quello che fa la differenza è la capacità di ascolto e l'empatia che si sviluppa in quel momento. Sapere essere vicino al problema che la persona porta. Quindi su questo mi attesto, come dire, sul fatto che probabilmente cambia l'intenzione, cioè ognuno di noi ci sta con un'intenzione, una modalità che è la sua, ma quello che è importante è la capacità di ascolto e di empatia e di camminare assieme che realmente le persone possono avere. Questo rispetto al primo punto, proprio perché, come dire, il Piemonte e la Val d'Aosta sono anche una regione significativa, in parte per la storia che hanno, per la capacità di fare rete, ma anche per il territorio che occupano, che sono un po' la parte a nord, ma in realtà più in collegamento con la Francia e il nord Europa. Vi dico alcuni dei cambiamenti che in questi anni, ma come già vi è stato detto ieri, in realtà sono venuti fuori in maniera più manifesta in questi anni, ma probabilmente era un cambiamento in atto da tempo che noi non avevamo neanche letto così bene precedentemente. Quindi sicuramente i 2 anni di pandemia hanno portato la parte maggiore, cioè quella che, come vi è stato detto, nel sistema antitratta la maggioranza è tuttora vittima di sfruttamento sessuale, più o meno l'80%, a passare dall'esterno all'interno. Si trovano sempre meno persone sulla strada vittime di sfruttamento sessuale, questo le rende più difficili da individuare perché sono più all'interno, dentro a delle case. E quindi è cambiata la modalità. Queste persone che stanno più all'interno spesso approcciano gli sportelli, come vi ho detto, c'è stato un problema lavorativo, era anche più difficile prostituirsi all'esterno durante quel periodo, per cercare aiuti rispetto a una casa, per cercare aiuti rispetto al permesso di soggiorno, per cercare aiuti rispetto ai bambini. E qui apro una parentesi che mi sembra che non sia venuta fuori ieri nel cambiamento. Molte delle donne vittime di tratta in Piemonte e in Valle d'Aosta, un numero molto alto negli ultimi anni, in realtà hanno bambini, 2 o 3 bambini. E quindi tutto il sistema antitratta ha dovuto un po' cambiare, perché in realtà era tarato su delle donne sole e non era preparato ad affrontare l'accoglienza di donne che avevano appunto 2 o 3 bambini. Alcune di queste donne non sono arrivate da tantissimo e quindi si può dire che l'Italia è stato il primo paese di approdo, ma molte di queste donne in realtà hanno fatto molti anni in altri paesi europei, in Francia, in Germania, in Svizzera, e poi sono state rimandate per Dublino, che è questa regola che dice che il primo paese d'ingresso è quello responsabile, di nuovo in Italia. Quindi sono donne che hanno una lunga storia di sfruttamento sessuale in diversi paesi europei e che sono tornate in Italia con magari 2 o 3 figli. Lo dico perché questa è una cosa relativamente nuova, in Piemonte con un numero molto alto, in altre regioni italiane no. Però ci dice qualcosa di questo fenomeno che è importante tenere conto. E come vi è stato spiegato ieri, l'onda lunga, cioè molte delle donne continuano a essere nigeriane della Costa d'Avorio perché c'è stato un ingresso negli anni passati, cominciano a aumentare le donne dell'est, cominciano a essere visibili molti più uomini vittime di sfruttamento sessuale, anche transessuali, molti più uomini del Bangladesh e del Pakistan vittime di sfruttamenti lavorativi multipli che partono dal loro paese, che durano durante tutto il percorso e che continuano in Italia. Quindi è un fenomeno che sta cambiando molto. L'altro dato che mi sembra interessante è che molte delle donne vittime di tratta in realtà sono accolte nel sistema d'accoglienza dei richiedenti asilo e dei rifugiati, quasi l'80%. Quindi questo un po' complica perché i due sistemi da una parte si parlano ma dall'altra rispondono anche a delle esigenze diverse. Questo vuol dire appunto che le persone non hanno un problema abitativo. Uno degli indicatori che fa ad esempio sospettare un buon operatore è una donna arrivata da poco che molto velocemente dai centri d'accoglienza del sud Italia passa a centri del nord Italia, che non ha nessun tipo di relazione, che quando gli chiedi ma perché ti sei spostata da questa città a un'altra ti dice ho un fidanzato ipotetico, e lì scattano diversi campanelli di allarme. Ma come vi ho detto è molto importante perché la donna non verrà a dirvi sono vittima di ritratta, verrà a dirvi ho un problema per il permesso di soggiorno. E quindi, come dire, tutto il sistema in realtà si attiverà per dargli una mano rispetto a questo problema di soggiorno, quasi in realtà a completare il circolo per poterla sfruttare meglio. È molto importante che in quella fase si riesca a stabilire una fiducia, perché in quel modo la si riesce in qualche modo a tirar fuori, ed è lì che è importante che i due sistemi si parlino. Rispetto al sistema mi sembrava importante dirvi, come vi è stato detto ieri, che la maggioranza dei fondi arrivano in parte dallo Stato, questo dell'antitratta, ma molti, quasi tutti i fondi in realtà che non sono del primo aggancio e dell'accoglienza, ma che lavorano più sulla formazione e l'inserimento lavorativo, sono fondi invece europei che sono dedicati all'accoglienza dei richiedenti asilo e dei rifugiati per fare questo lavoro specifico. Adesso vi dico qualche numero, non per togliervi la speranza, ma per far vedere come a catena tra il primo aggancio, che è molto elevato. L'ufficio di Torino è anche un ufficio che ha delle pratiche molto innovative, non solo è un ufficio dove ogni giorno entrano 200 e 300 persone perché ha una storia, come dire, di più di 40 anni di radicamento nel territorio, ma anche un ufficio che ad esempio durante la pandemia ha aperto delle unità di strada, ma non antitratta, per pulire le strade, assieme ai volontari del quartiere, perché ha capito che le persone che avevano un disagio abitativo e che avevano una difficoltà vivevano sulla strada non per prostituirsi, ma perché non avevano più un posto, e in realtà, come dire, pulendo le strade era facile capire che tipo di problemi avessero le persone che stavano sulla strada e dargli un numero di un ufficio molto generale che in realtà poteva rispondere ai bisogni, dal permesso di soggiorno alla ricerca della casa, alla formazione, all'accompagnamento lavorativo, ma facendo delle cose assieme, facendo anche dei pranzi sulla strada dove in qualche modo i volontari, le persone e chi lì stava vivendo potesse collaborare assieme. Io mi taccio, spero di avervi dato un'immagine e un quadro di quale è la realtà. un po' di come è cambiata e di come è importante riuscire a stare dentro le realtà e ai cambiamenti, cambiando la modalità di accompagnare le persone e facendo rete. Ci tenevo a dire questo, è molto importante. Certo, noi abbiamo una rete, ci troviamo con tutti i nostri uffici, ma è ancora molto più importante che l'ufficio che sta in quel territorio faccia rete con tutte le realtà di quel territorio, quindi come dire, istituzioni religiose e non religiose e istituzioni dello Stato che assieme collaborano e provano, ognuno facendo il suo pezzo. Qualcuno è più bravo nell'aggancio, qualcuno è più bravo nell'accoglienza, qualcuno è più bravo nella formazione, qualcuno è più bravo nella ricerca lavoro, ed è bene che ognuno faccia il suo pezzo specifico nel rispetto reciproco. Se noi sappiamo collaborare, tutte le persone che saranno vittime, le vittime di tratta, qualcuno sarà religioso, qualcuno non lo sarà, qualcuno avrà dei figli, qualcuno avrà ricerca di una cosa più specifica, troverà in questa nostra capacità di dialogo e di specificità una possibilità di essere aiutato. Grazie per l'attenzione.
Grazie, Cristina. I think an emerging theme is the working together across sectors, law enforcement, religious sectors, government, and asylum seekers. And I'd never really thought of human trafficking and modern slavery in terms of the children too, and it's a really important point to bring up. We now go to a little bit further afield, a fair way away from Rome, to Western Australia, or actually I think it's Sydney, where he is at the moment. Francis Campbell is the rector, the Vice-Chancellor, I think, of the University of Notre Dame in Australia. And he's a former British ambassador to the Holy See. He's had an extensive diplomatic, the not-for-profit. He's been in Amnesty International and also worked in the office of the Prime Minister of Tony Blair. So a very varied career and high-level career. I think yesterday, Francis, we heard about the experience of Georgetown University in the US in relation to slavery in its foundation and early growth phases. So I would like to put the question to you, what role can universities, and in particular Catholic universities, play today in responding to modern slavery? And how is you've been in different roles across a wide spectrum of systems, if you like. How has your faith helped you to deal with and fight modern slavery in that variation of roles? Thank you.
David, thank you, and can I echo the sentiments of the other speakers in thanking the various parties, the Gregorian University, Global Freedom Network, the Walk Free Foundation, the Minderoo Foundation, and indeed all the parties that are organising this conference. I know we're here to talk about one of the great human rights issues of our time, anti-slavery and anti-trafficking. But it'd be remiss of me not to actually, at the outset, offer some thoughts for those people that are suffering in the east of Europe at this point in time, which is also a human rights issue that's playing out on the European continent. So I just want to say that I'm sure all of us join in support of what the Holy Father is doing in his efforts in setting aside protocol and doing what he can to help to bring peace to that situation. Going to your two questions, David, if I could reverse order them. If I could answer the personal one first, because I think it leads on in a strange way to the second one. The first one is, how has your faith, in a sense, helped you work or look at this issue? And I would say, like many people, and as the Sheikh has already spoken in his address, and I think I would have been one of them, I can think of a long time in my career where I never heard of slavery, or if I did hear of it, I heard of it in the historic sense. I probably was complacent, like everyone else, that something like this was going on within our cities and on our doorsteps, or that the economy that I was benefiting from, that parts of it were perhaps built on slavery and on trafficking. And what opened up that awakening, there were attempts, I suppose, throughout my life to open it up, but in a sense you're caught up with the modern world and you don't take time to look around you. So it really was, I think, in and around 2015, when the Santa Marta network started, with Pope Francis asking the Cardinal in London, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, to really address this and to go out of his way to look into it, to highlight it. And it was at that stage that you were asked really to link this as a moral issue, to do something about it. And it sort of drew on strands that had been there before, but as I say, that perhaps I didn't listen to or was complacent about. And I think there's probably now, I think it's 2 centuries. In fact, it's 2 centuries this year. It's 2022, but I have to go back to 1822, when the first known members of my family left the island of Ireland. And every generation since then, there's been somebody leaving. But my first relatives left and arrived here in Sydney in 1822, and they didn't arrive voluntarily. And it's been very moving, actually, to look at the records and to see where they were housed, because the windows in my village church at home in Ireland are dedicated to their memory, because for 2 centuries that was a very traumatic effect on our village, where young men were taken and transported to Australia, never to see their families again. Now you can fast forward over the centuries and stories that are told to you, and I recall one told to me when I was 18 by a lady who had migrated from Donegal to the United States. And when I met her, she was well into her 90s. But she recounted a story where at the age of 16, she traveled to the east coast of the United States to emigrate. But she said, thankfully, that her brother had told her not to leave the port with anyone else, that he would be there. And even if he was late, she was not to go with anyone else. And I asked her, why was that the case? And she said that it was the case because many of the young girls getting off the boat were approached by people on the quayside with messages like, your brother sent me to get you, he's late. And they innocently walked off with a complete stranger and into a life of some form of slavery. Now, those stories are shocking, but it's the fact that they're not part simply of a historical experience. They are part of a contemporary experience. So I bring it back to the challenge that was posed to me in my previous job running a university in London by the Cardinal in London, working with the Metropolitan Police, working with the then UK Home Secretary Theresa May, and subsequently became Prime Minister, about really asking a Catholic university to step in and to do something. So what can you do? I think you can do 2 things as a Catholic university. The first thing you can do is you can do what a university is naturally good at. You can apply yourself in terms of research. You can give that research. You can help to direct attention towards something where perhaps governments have been complacent about. And having worked in the EU and the United Nations and in the British government, with the exception of forced marriage, I never really came across the issues of slavery or anti-trafficking. They weren't talked about. They weren't seen to be an issue. And I don't say that as a specific criticism against those agencies. I think it reflects broadly a complacency that existed in society, that this wasn't a problem. So I think universities, in partnership with many of the agencies that are represented here today, but in particular faith groups, have a huge job to do in reawakening a consciousness, in highlighting the nature of this issue. And I think that's what we were asked to do in London. And I think we did it through the opening of a research centre and then also the creation of courses. I could highlight that here in Australia, a former ambassador, Australian ambassador to the Holy See, is doing pioneering work here in Australia on the anti-slavery task force, Ambassador John McCarthy. But also, we at Notre Dame decided that we would start teaching courses to begin to address the capacity issue, to focus on issues like supply chain, to offer something tangible that we can do as universities. But I think we can't stop there, because I think we have a moral imperative. And my colleagues spoke about the human stories of people who are in the day-to-day period that we're now dealing with, tricked into coming to the West, tricked with the hope of a better life, offered a false promise, often by someone they know, and tricked into a life of either sexual slavery or work slavery or some form of it. So as universities that have an ethos and a mission that goes beyond the transmission of knowledge, but that has a moral purpose, surely our moral purpose is to step into that breach of trust and to try to offer those people who have been traumatized and victimized, to offer them some hope, either through employment or through retraining, that they can perhaps rediscover over time some of the hope that initially was used to allure them from their home country towards one of the Western countries, that we might be able to actually do our job and give a moral purpose and offer somebody something back as a training opportunity or an employment opportunity or something that actually gives them a stake in life. So I think it's a combination of both the research and also it's a combination of the moral purpose. In conclusion, what more could we do as religious entities or as universities? I think we're facing a criminal network that is profiting out of human trafficking and slavery. It rivals the drugs network in terms of its scale and in terms of its size. And law enforcement and national jurisdictions are fighting something that is a global phenomenon. But universities are a global phenomenon, as are faith groups a global phenomenon. And if we take the case study of what happened in 2019 to 39 Vietnamese migrants, then I think there is a chilling request there, which we have to address. And I just want to read, in conclusion, one of the recorded messages from one of those victims in the back of that lorry that suffocated. It was recorded at 7:37 p.m. on the 22nd of October 2019. And it said this: "It's Chuan. I am sorry. I cannot take care of you. I am sorry. I am sorry. I cannot breathe. I want to come back to my family. Have a good life." Those words, ladies and gentlemen, are a challenge to all of us. If we think we can't do something, we can, because we still have breath. And what could we do? The network that misled those Vietnamese migrants and murdered them covered many countries: Vietnam, Romania, Belgium, the UK, Ireland. As faith networks or as universities, surely we can rival that network and do good and challenge it, raise awareness, so that nobody can ever again say, "I didn't know, I was complacent, or I was distracted. Slavery isn't an issue," because it is an issue. And I think that's what universities can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. And kind of a very sobering kind of conclusion, in a way, the story of those 39 Vietnamese migrants who died, who were discovered in the back of a truck in the UK. But I think that I really like the practical thing, that the moral imperative, and you said to step into the breach of trust through employment and through retraining. And that to me is a very, that both moral sense but a practical sense of trust, so they can get on with their lives. And also that kind of note of hope which you spoke of, that, you know, we look at criminal networks, we look at the human trafficking networks, we look at the drug networks. We know that they're global, and we tend to get very discouraged. We just think it's too big. And as you rightfully say, university networks, the networks of schools, the Catholic Church, these are networks that are much bigger, actually. And so we need to take heart with that and take strength by that. So thank you for your comments.